The grand crystal palace of the empire sparkled under the light of 3 moons, its towers reaching toward the star-filled sky. Inside, Queen May stood before her mirror, her crystalline form catching and scattering light in ways that made her advisors look away in discomfort. Unlike the perfectly symmetrical patterns that marked other members of her species, May's crystalline body held swirling, chaotic designs. Where others had straight, geometric lines running through their transparent forms, she had waves and curves that bent light in unexpected ways. By her people's standards, she was considered hideously deformed. "Your Majesty," Royal Advisor Tom spoke softly, keeping his eyes fixed on the floor. His own crystal form showed perfect hexagonal patterns, the mark of proper breeding among their kind. "The delegation from the Blue Star Kingdom has declined your offer of alliance." May didn't turn around. She had expected this response. It was the same answer she had received 12 times in the past year. Did they at least have the courage to state their true reason this time? Tom shifted uncomfortably, his crystal edges catching the light. "They cited incompatibility of royal bloodlines, Your Majesty." "You mean they don't want their perfect geometric patterns corrupted by my chaos?" May said, her voice carrying no anger, only tired acceptance. She had heard every possible polite excuse by now. The economic reports on her desk told the real story. The Crystal Empire needed allies. Their mining operations were failing, their trade routes were under pressure from rival empires, and their technology was falling behind. A royal marriage alliance would have solved everything, if only she had been born normal. "Perhaps we could try the Diamond Collective next," Tom suggested hopefully. "They're more progressive in their thinking." May turned away from the mirror, her movement creating a cascade of rainbow reflections across the chamber walls. Some of her younger servants actually found these light shows beautiful, but they would never dare say so openly. Such thoughts went against thousands of years of crystal culture. "The Diamond Collective rejected my sister's marriage proposal last month," May said. "And she has perfect symmetry. They won't even consider me." She moved to her window, looking out over the capital city. Millions of her people lived in the crystalline structures below, each one a perfect example of what she was not. "Then we must find another way," Tom said, his loyalty obvious in his voice. He had served her family for decades, and despite her appearance, he had never shown her anything but respect. The Empire needs a miracle," May finished for him. "Or at least a queen who doesn't look like a crack in a window." A young messenger burst into the room, his crystal form vibrating with excitement. "Your Majesty, news from the Galactic Council." May turned, trying not to notice how the messenger's eyes widened at her appearance before quickly looking down. "Speak." "A new species has joined the council," the messenger announced. "They call themselves humans. Their ambassador requests permission to establish diplomatic relations with the Crystal Empire." Tom's perfect patterns flickered with interest. "Humans. I've heard strange things about them. They're supposed to be different. Made of soft matter instead of crystal." "Soft matter?" May asked, her interest genuinely piqued. In all her studies of galactic species, she had never heard of such a thing. "How do they maintain their form?" "Nobody knows," the messenger said. "But they've already established successful trade relations with 3 other empires. They have advanced technology and seem eager to expand their influence." May walked to her throne, her irregular patterns creating dancing lights across the floor. For the first time in months, she felt a spark of hope. A new species might mean new opportunities. Perhaps these humans would see things differently than the crystal-based life forms that dominated this sector of space. "Send word to the Galactic Council," she commanded. "The Crystal Empire welcomes their ambassador. Prepare the diplomatic quarters for their arrival." As her servants rushed to obey, May looked once more at her reflection in the palace walls. Perhaps, just perhaps, these humans would be the miracle her empire needed. She had no way of knowing just how right she was. The royal landing platform buzzed with nervous activity as the human ship descended from the purple sky. Queen May stood with her royal guard, their perfect crystal forms making her irregular patterns seem even more obvious in comparison. She had chosen to face this meeting directly, despite her advisors suggesting she send representatives instead. The ship was unlike anything they had seen before. Smooth metal instead of crystal, curved instead of angular. As it landed, steam hissed from its sides, making several crystal guards step back in alarm. The ship's door opened with a soft whoosh, and Ambassador Jack Stone stepped out. The crystal people stared in fascination at his strange, soft matter form. He wore what he called a suit, dark blue fabric that contrasted with his pale skin. His brown hair moved slightly in the wind, a sight that made several guards whisper in confusion. But it was his eyes that caught May's attention. When he looked at her, he didn't flinch or look away. Instead, he smiled broadly. "Your Majesty," Jack said, bowing deeply. "On behalf of Earth and humanity, I thank you for this welcome." His translator device converted his words perfectly into the crystal language. May waited for the moment his translator would show him her true form, for his smile to fade like all others did. The devices didn't just translate words, they helped different species see each other clearly. Jack's smile grew even wider. "I must say, Your Majesty, I've seen many extraordinary things since becoming Earth's ambassador, but never have I seen such remarkable light patterns. The way your form creates those rainbow cascades is absolutely fascinating." A shocked murmur ran through the assembled crystal nobles. Tom, standing at May's side, actually forgot protocol and turned to stare at the human in surprise. "You find my patterns fascinating?" May asked carefully. "Sure, there must be some translation error." "Absolutely." Jack stepped closer, his eyes following the swirling designs in her crystal form with genuine interest. "On Earth, we have something called aurora borealis, lights in the sky that dance in patterns. Your form reminds me of that natural wonder. We humans travel thousands of miles just to see such displays." The nobles were now openly whispering among themselves. No one had ever compared their queen to something beautiful before. "Perhaps," May said, regaining her composure, "we should continue this discussion inside." "The trading agreements." "Of course, Your Majesty," Jack replied, falling into step beside her as they walked toward the palace. He seemed completely unaware of how his behavior violated normal protocol. No one walked beside the queen. They walked behind her, where they didn't have to look at her patterns. Inside the meeting chamber, Jack continued to surprise everyone. He asked intelligent questions about crystal culture, showed genuine interest in their history, and most shockingly, kept looking directly at May while speaking to her. "Your palace architecture is remarkable," he said during a break in trade discussions. "The way it works with your natural forms to create light and color, it's like living art." "Most find it rather chaotic," May said carefully. "Chaos can be beautiful," Jack replied simply. "On Earth, we have a saying, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. It means that what one person finds beautiful, another might not, and that's perfectly fine. Beauty isn't about following rules. It's about what moves your heart." Tom dropped his data crystal, creating a sharp clinking sound in the sudden silence. No one had ever spoken such thoughts openly in the palace before. May found herself wondering about this strange human world, where beauty had no fixed rules. "Tell me more about Earth," she said, surprising herself with the request. Jack's face lit up. "I'd be honored, though I should warn you, once I start talking about home, it's hard to get me to stop." For the first time in years, May felt herself truly smile, her patterns creating a dance of colors across the chamber walls. And for the first time ever, someone smiled back at those colors instead of turning away. Neither of them realized it then, but that moment would change not just their lives, but the fate of two civilizations. 3 days after the humans' arrival, Queen May found herself in the palace gardens, a place she usually avoided because of how her patterns reflected in the crystal flowers. But today was different. Today she had agreed to meet Jack here, away from the watchful eyes of her court. "Your gardens are incredible," Jack said, walking up to a crystal flower that sparkled with geometric patterns. But I notice all the flowers have the same design. Perfect symmetry is our way, May explained, staying in the shadows. Even our plants are bred for it. Jack turned to her, that now familiar direct gaze making her feel both uncomfortable and strangely seen. Then where did your patterns come from? If everything here is geometric, how did you end up with such unique designs? May hesitated. No one had ever dared to ask her this directly. I was born during a stellar storm, she finally said. The radiation affected my formation. The doctors tried to correct it, but they couldn't make you geometric, Jack finished. He pulled something from his pocket, a small device that projected images into the air. May I show you something from Earth? May nodded, curious despite herself. The air filled with images, Earth's oceans with their chaotic waves, clouds swirling in unpredictable patterns, rivers cutting irregular paths through landscapes, trees with branches spreading in all directions. On Earth, Jack explained, perfect geometry is rare in nature. We find beauty in chaos, in randomness, in the unexpected. He changed the image to show a human crowd. Look at us. No two humans look exactly alike. We come in different colors, shapes, sizes. We celebrate these differences. But how do you know what is beautiful if you have no standard? May asked, moving closer to see better. Her patterns cast dancing lights across the projected images. Beauty isn't about knowing, Jack said softly. It's about feeling. When I see your patterns, I feel like I'm watching a dance of light. It moves me. That's beauty. May's patterns flickered with emotion. You really mean that, don't you? I do. Jack changed the image again, showing the Human Art Museum. Look at these paintings. Some are realistic, some abstract. Some people love one style, others prefer different ones. And that's okay. For the next hour, Jack showed her more of Earth's art and nature. May found herself moving fully into the light, her patterns creating new effects in the projected images. For the first time in her life, she didn't try to hide them. Would you like to see some human music? Jack asked. We have songs about beauty in imperfection. Before May could answer, Tom appeared in the garden entrance. Your Majesty, the Noble Council requests an emergency meeting. They're concerned about the amount of time you're spending with the human ambassador. May straightened, her royal training taking over. Tell them I will be there shortly. As Tom left, Jack switched off his projector. I apologize if I've caused problems. No, May said firmly. You've shown me something important. My whole life, I thought I was broken because I didn't match our standard of beauty. But maybe the standard is what's broken. Would you like to learn more about Earth's views on beauty? Jack asked. Not just art and nature, but how we came to accept and celebrate differences. May looked at the geometric garden around them, then at her own swirling patterns reflected in a nearby crystal wall. For the first time, she didn't immediately look away from her reflection. Yes, she said, I would like that very much. As she walked to meet her council, May's patterns swirled with new confidence. Let them whisper about her spending time with the human. She had spent her whole life trying to fit their definition of beauty. Perhaps it was time they learned to see through different eyes. In the garden, Jack watched her go, noticing how her patterns painted the walls with moving light. He smiled, thinking how strange it was that an entire civilization could miss the beauty that was right in front of them. Neither realized that their simple garden conversation had just planted the seeds of a cultural revolution. The noble council chamber was filled with tension as Lord Reed, his perfectly geometric patterns gleaming, stood to speak. This has gone far enough. Our queen spends too much time with this soft matter creature. The other empires are starting to talk. Queen May sat on her crystal throne, watching the angry faces before her. A week had passed since her garden meeting with Jack, and the whispers had grown into shouts. The Blue Star Kingdom sent a message this morning, Lord Reed continued. They offer a new marriage proposal, not with their crown prince, but with their third son. They say it's our last chance for an alliance. May's patterns rippled with surprise. The same kingdom that had rejected her just weeks ago now offered a lesser marriage. She understood immediately. They feared the growing connection between the Crystal Empire and Earth. And what of our trade negotiations with Earth? Tom asked from his place beside the throne. Ambassador Stone's proposals could save our mining colonies. We don't need human help. Lord Reed's patterns flashed with anger. Better to marry into a proper crystal bloodline, even a lower one, than to become dependent on these soft creatures. Just then, a young messenger burst into the chamber. Your Majesty, ships from the Starblade Empire have been spotted near our outer colonies. The room erupted in chaos. The Starblade Empire was their oldest enemy, always looking for signs of weakness. If they attacked now when the Crystal Empire was at its weakest. Where is Ambassador Stone? May asked, her voice cutting through the noise. In the communication chamber, Your Majesty. He's speaking with his government. May swept out of the council chamber, her swirling patterns leaving trails of light in her wake. She found Jack ending his call, his face unusually serious. The Starblade Empire contacted Earth, he said without preamble. They threaten trade sanctions if we ally with your empire. May's patterns dimmed. And what did your government say? They want me to be careful. To maybe slow down the negotiations. Jack ran a hand through his hair, a human gesture of frustration she had come to recognize. They're worried about starting a galactic incident. I understand, May said quietly. Perhaps Lord Reed is right. Perhaps we should accept the Blue Star Kingdom's offer. No, Jack's forceful response surprised them both. Sorry, that was unprofessional. But May, Your Majesty, you can't marry someone just because they're finally willing to settle for you. You deserve better than that. Do I? May moved to the crystal wall, watching her chaotic patterns reflect. My empire needs this alliance. My people are suffering. If I must sacrifice my happiness. There's another way, Jack said. Earth doesn't just want trade. We want real allies. Partners who can help us understand this galaxy. The Starblade Empire threatens sanctions. Let them. Earth has survived worse. You would risk your position for my empire. For your empire. And for you. Jack stepped closer. In the past week, I've seen how you care for your people. How you listen to everyone, even those who can't look at you. You're not just beautiful in appearance. May, you're beautiful in here. He tapped his chest. Before May could respond, Tom rushed in. Your Majesty, the Noble Council is voting to accept the Blue Star Kingdom's proposal without your consent. They say it's for the good of the Empire. May's patterns flashed with an anger she had never shown before. They dare. May, Jack said softly. Whatever you decide, know that Earth stands with you. I stand with you. She looked at him, this strange soft matter being who had shown her a new way to see herself. Then she looked at Tom, who had served her family faithfully through generations. Gather the council, she commanded. All of them. And broadcast it to the city. It's time our people saw their queen stand up for herself. As she swept toward the council chamber, her pattern swirled with purpose. For too long, she had let others define her worth. For too long, she had accepted their judgment. No more. Behind her, Jack smiled. The revolution he had glimpsed in their garden conversation was about to begin. The great hall of the Crystal Palace was packed. Every noble, every advisor, and through the broadcast crystals, every citizen in the capital could see their queen as she entered. For once, May didn't try to hide her patterns. She let them flash and swirl, painting the walls with light. Lord Reeves stood at the center of the Noble Council. Your Majesty, we have voted. The alliance with the Blue Star Kingdom is our only hope. Their third prince awaits your answer. Before I respond, May said, her voice clear and strong. I wish to hear from Earth's ambassador. Jack stepped forward. Some nobles whispered at his presence in this sacred chamber, but they fell silent as he began to speak. For centuries, he said, the Crystal Empire has followed one idea of beauty: perfect geometry, straight lines, exact symmetry. He walked to the center of the room. But let me tell you what I see when I look at your queen. The nobles shifted uncomfortably. No one had ever dared to directly discuss the queen's appearance in public. I see the aurora dancing in Earth's sky, Jack continued. I see ocean waves catching sunlight. I see the infinite patterns of our universe, which is never perfectly geometric, yet always perfectly beautiful. Pretty words, Lord Reed interrupted, but they don't change the fact that our empire needs a proper alliance. Proper? Jack's voice grew stronger. You would rather ally with those who rejected your queen, who now offer a lesser marriage because they fear Earth's influence, who see her as a last resort. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. No one had stated the truth so boldly before. I see a queen, Jack went on, who puts her empire before herself, who listens to those who won't look at her, who carries the weight of your judgment without complaint. He turned to face May directly. I see the most beautiful being I've ever encountered, inside and out. May's patterns swirled with emotion, casting rainbow lights across the entire chamber. This is outrageous. Lord Reed shouted. You dare to speak of our queen this way? You, a soft matter creature who can't possibly understand our ways. I understand more than you think, Jack replied calmly. Then, to everyone's shock, he walked up the steps to the throne. Protocol stated that no one should stand so close to the queen. But he didn't stop. Queen May of the Crystal Empire, he said formally, Earth offers you not just an alliance, but a true partnership, your empire's strength and wisdom, combined with Earth's resources and innovation. Not a marriage of convenience, but one of mutual respect. And, he paused, then added softly, and love. The chamber exploded in chaos. Nobles were shouting, guards were moving forward, but May raised her hand, and silence fell. Are you proposing what I think you are proposing, Ambassador Stone? She asked, her patterns creating a light show that made the entire chamber glow. I am, Jack said, smiling that direct smile that had first caught her attention. I, Jack Stone, ask for your hand in marriage, not despite your patterns, but because of them, because they show your true self, unique, beautiful, and unafraid to be different. Lord Reed stepped forward. This is impossible. No queen has ever married outside our species. The bloodline, May interrupted, standing, has followed your rules of beauty for too long. She turned to her people through the broadcast crystals. Look at me, really look. I am your queen. I am not perfect by our standards, but perhaps our standards are what need to change. She turned to Jack. Earth offers us more than trade. They offer us a new way of seeing, a new way of thinking. Her pattern swirled around them both. And yes, a new way of loving. Standing before her entire empire, May reached out and took Jack's hand. I accept your proposal, Ambassador Stone. Let our union show that true beauty knows no bounds, and true alliances come from the heart. The chamber was absolutely silent for a moment. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, a young crystal being began to glow with irregular patterns. Then another, and another. The revolution had begun. The week after Queen May accepted Jack's proposal, the Crystal Empire changed more than it had in 1,000 years. The palace halls buzzed with endless activity as news spread across the galaxy. Young crystal people began deliberately altering their patterns. What started with a few brave souls in the capital spread like wildfire. They used special lights and harmless radiation to create swirls and waves in their geometric forms. The older generation was horrified, but they couldn't stop the tide of change. Look at this, Tom said, showing May the morning reports. They stood in her private chamber, watching news from across the empire. A group of crystal artists is creating what they call free-form art. They're deliberately making asymmetrical sculptures. May's patterns rippled with joy as she watched the images. And what do the people think of this? Rebellion. That's the surprising part, Tom said, his own patterns showing hints of irregular movement, something he'd started allowing himself recently. The public loves it, especially the younger generation. They're calling it the beauty revolution. A young servant rushed in, nearly forgetting to bow in her excitement. Your Majesty, you need to see the city center. May and Tom hurried to the balcony. Below, thousands of crystal people had gathered. But instead of the usual orderly geometric patterns, the crowd was a sea of swirling lights. Young crystal beings had altered their patterns to create waves, spirals, and random designs. Some had even managed to make their patterns change and flow, like May's did. They're calling themselves the Queen's Pattern Movement, Jack said, joining them on the balcony. It's not just here. Similar gatherings are happening across your empire. The noble council must be having fits, May said, though her patterns danced with happiness. Oh, they are, Tom confirmed. Lord Reed hasn't left his residence in 3 days. Says he can't bear to see the corruption of our sacred geometry. But look at this, Jack added, showing them his communication device. 3 other non-crystal species have requested diplomatic relations with the Crystal Empire since our announcement. They say any civilization brave enough to challenge its oldest beliefs is worth knowing. May watched her people below, remembering all the years she spent hiding her patterns in shadows. I never dreamed my differences would lead to this. You showed them it was possible to be different, Jack said softly. To be yourself. A group of crystal children in the square below had started a game, trying to make their patterns match May's swirling designs. Their laughter rang up to the balcony. There's more, Tom said, checking his reports. The mining colonies report a 30% increase in production. Apparently, when workers stopped forcing themselves to maintain perfect geometry while working, they could move more efficiently. And the Starblade Empire? May asked, thinking of their threats. Jack grinned. Withdrew their trade sanctions against Earth. Apparently, they don't want to risk opposing what they're calling the most interesting cultural movement in recent galactic history. May's patterns created a dance of colors across the balcony. And the Blue Star Kingdom sent a very polite note withdrawing their marriage proposal, Tom said with obvious satisfaction. Though I hear their young prince was seen trying to create irregular patterns in his private chambers. The crowd below began to sing an old crystal song, but with a new twist. They were deliberately making their patterns clash and swirl, creating a light show unlike anything in their history. Beautiful, Jack whispered, watching May's patterns join the display. Yes, she agreed, but she wasn't looking at the crowd. She was looking at him, this soft matter being who had taught her people to see beauty in difference. Change isn't always easy, is it? The best kinds of change never are, he replied. But look what happens when someone is brave enough to be themselves. Below them, the revolution continued to spread, one pattern at a time. The Crystal Empire would never be the same. And that, May thought as she watched her people celebrate their newfound freedom, was the most beautiful thing of all. The day of the royal wedding dawned with all 3 moons still visible in the purple sky. The Crystal Palace had been transformed. Instead of the traditional geometric patterns, the decorations celebrated both order and chaos. Perfect crystal shapes mixed with swirling, dancing lights. Queen May stood in her chamber, watching her reflection. Her patterns moved freely now, creating waves of light that would have scandalized the court just months ago. Today, they were the height of fashion. Your Majesty, Tom entered, his own patterns showing subtle waves, the new mark of a progressive crystal person. The Earth delegation has arrived, and you should see the crowd outside. May moved to her window. The streets were packed with crystal people, their patterns a riot of colors and shapes. Many had decorated themselves with swirling designs that matched her own. Mixed among them were hundreds of humans who had traveled from Earth to witness this historic union. They're calling it the wedding of 2 worlds, Tom said, smiling. The nobles who oppose you are now claiming they supported this alliance all along. Even Lord Reed, May asked, amused. He arrived this morning wearing slightly asymmetrical patterns. Claims it was an accident, of course. The ceremony itself broke every tradition the Crystal Empire had ever known. Instead of the formal, geometric procession, May walked through a corridor where crystal people and humans stood together. The humans wore clothes that sparkled and reflected light, while the crystal people displayed their newly individualistic patterns proudly. Jack waited at the end of the aisle, wearing a suit embedded with crystal shards that caught and reflected May's patterns. When she reached him, their lights danced together, creating new patterns neither species had seen before. The ancient crystal marriage rites were combined with human traditions. When Jack spoke of Earth's custom of wedding rings, the crystal minister suggested they exchange light patterns instead. Jack received a small crystal emd that would let him reflect light like his new people, while May's patterns shifted to include a small, perfect geometric heart, a reminder of where she came from. In all my years as minister, the old crystal being said, his own patterns showing surprising waves, I never thought I would join two such different beings. But looking at you now, I see that difference itself can be the greatest harmony. When they were pronounced married, the entire palace lit up with thousands of unique patterns. The humans gasped in wonder, and the crystal people cheered. Another break from tradition that no one seemed to mind anymore. At the celebration feast, crystal dishes served human food, and human dishes held crystal nutrients. The two species couldn't eat each other's food, but they shared everything else: stories, laughter, and dreams for the future. Look there, Jack pointed out to May. A young crystal child was teaching a human child how to use a light crystal to make patterns, while the human child showed the crystal child how to dance. Neither seemed to notice or care about their differences. The next generation won't even remember why we thought this was impossible, May said, her patterns swirling happily. The Crystal Empire changed forever that day. Within a year, their economy had grown stronger than ever. The mix of human innovation and crystal technology created new industries. Crystal art, once rigidly geometric, became famous across the galaxy for its unique beauty. Young crystal beings grew up knowing they could be whatever shape they wanted to be. As the celebration continued into the night, May and Jack stood on their balcony, watching the three moons rise. "Do you remember," Jack asked, "when you thought your patterns made you ugly?" May's swirling lights danced with his crystal embed, creating new patterns that reflected across the city. "I remember. I thought I needed to change to be beautiful. And instead, you changed the meaning of beauty itself." Below them, their people celebrated together, humans and crystal beings, geometric and chaotic, all finding beauty in their differences. "No," May corrected him gently, her patterns brightening with love. "We did that together." And in that moment, as their lights danced and their worlds merged, no one could deny that this was the beginning of something truly beautiful. The end.